I was born 40 years after the war, yet the scars it left were still fresh on the bones of our worlds. I never saw the enemy's face. No one had, not anymore. Their name, their language, their banners, all of it had been erased so thoroughly that history itself seemed embarrassed to remember. They had made the last mistake any species would ever make with us. They made humanity angry. Not irritated, not cautious, not defensive, truly angry. My father never spoke much about those years. He'd been a Marine on the Outer Rim when the first shots were fired, back when diplomats still thought they could talk. He used to say the war wasn't about territory or resources. It was about a look. A look on their faces, smug, cold, the kind of look that says you're not even considered alive. That look is what did it. By the time I was old enough to understand, humanity had changed. The stars felt smaller. We didn't explore the way we once did. We hunted. And everyone in the galaxy, every single intelligent species, gave us space like we were an unstable bomb with a hair trigger. I once asked my father why we erased their name. He just stared at me for a long moment and said, "Because remembering them would keep the hate alive. And son, we don't need that anymore." But I could tell by the way his hands shook when he said it. He still remembered. All of them did. The veterans called it the silence. Not the battles, not the massacres, the aftermath. Whole star systems where light took years to cross, and yet not a single signal or breath of life remained. Empty worlds that had once been cities. Oceans turned to glass. Planets drifting in perfect silence, like tombstones in space. My father never told me the details, but other men did when the drinks were strong enough. They spoke of the way the enemy fought without mercy, and how, once the line was crossed, humans fought without restraint. They told me the fleets moved like a single organism, not for conquest, but for obliteration. No one ever used the word victory, only ending. I serve now in the Terran Frontier Patrol. We don't fight wars anymore, not because we can't, but because no one dares start one. The memory of that nameless species is written in the fear behind alien eyes. The Council worlds pretend it's diplomacy that keeps the peace, but we know the truth. It's the absence of those who once challenged us. Some nights, while drifting between assignments, I find myself staring at the empty sectors. Coordinates classified, but we all know what they are. I can't help but wonder, were they truly monsters? Or did they just push too hard, not realizing what they had awakened? It doesn't matter. No one will ever know. That's the way humanity wanted it. But lately, there have been whispers. Strange signals. A fragment of language caught by deep space probes. Something that doesn't belong to any known race. The kind of anomaly that gets buried under security clearance denied reports. And 2 days ago, I was given new orders. Classified route. No return date, no details. Just a location. One of those empty sectors. Whatever's out there, I have a feeling history might remember their name again. The orders came in a simple black packet. No seals, no insignia, no clear chain of command. Just my name, coordinates, and a message burned into the screen. You will not record transmissions. You will not initiate comms. You will not alter your course. I'd been in the Frontier Patrol for nearly a decade, and I'd never seen anything this stripped down. No ship logs, no partner crew, no sensor relays. It was like they wanted me to disappear quietly if something happened. The coordinates were in the Morn sector, a place so dead, so off-limits, it didn't even appear on civilian star maps. My father's generation had a name for it, the Cauterized Belt. When I asked him why they called it that, he only said, "Because that's what you do when the infection is too deep. You burn it clean." The Vigilant, my patrol craft, hummed under me as I punched in the course. The nav computer hesitated, a tiny flicker of processing delay, before it displayed the route. Even the machine seemed reluctant. Space is quiet when you're alone, but this was different. This was the kind of quiet that presses on your chest and makes your ears ring. No trade convoys, no comm chatter bleeding through from nearby sectors. Just the slow, steady pulse of my ship's reactor and the occasional thud of the hull expanding under thermal stress. I spent the first day staring at the jump gate timer, reading and rereading the orders. No further instructions came. On the second day, I noticed something odd. The ship's passive sensors kept dropping data. Not malfunctioning exactly. More like forgetting. One moment I'd see the map of surrounding stars, and the next it was blank, like those systems had never existed. I'd heard rumors of tech like this, memory scramblers, data wiping fields, but they were banned under galactic law. That didn't stop the Terran fleets during the silence, and clearly, it didn't stop whoever sent me here. On the fourth day, I entered the sector. I expected debris, burnt planets, something to confirm the old war stories. Instead, there was nothing. A black so deep it looked like space had been scooped out and replaced with an absence of reality. No stars ahead, just a faint haze, like dust caught in a beam of light. My ship's A, I refused to identify it. The display labeled the entire area as "No data available." That's when the comm crackled. It wasn't an incoming hail. It wasn't even a voice. It was more like breathing. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My first instinct was to kill the channel, but something made me keep listening. The sound shifted. Faint clicking noises threading through the static, like claws tapping on metal. I tightened my grip on the yoke. "Identify yourself," I said, knowing full well I was breaking orders. The breathing stopped. And then, a voice, not in any language I knew, but somehow I understood it. Not the words exactly, but the intention. It was a tone you didn't need translation for. Mocking. Hungry. I shut the channel, but the voice kept coming, not through the speakers now, directly into my head. "You found us. My father used to tell me about the first moments of the war. The enemy didn't attack our fleets. They didn't bomb our worlds. They came inside our heads. They whispered their superiority like it was fact, a truth woven into the fabric of the universe. And for a while, we believed them. Until someone, somewhere, decided to push back. I knew, without a doubt, that I was hearing the same thing those soldiers had heard decades ago. "I thought we wiped you out," I said under my breath. "You did not." I pushed the ship forward, deeper into the haze. That's when the stars reappeared. Not stars, exactly, but pinpoints of cold light scattered through the black. They moved. Slowly at first, then with unmistakable intent. They weren't ships, they weren't asteroids, they were them. No biological signatures, no heat. But my gut knew. These were the last remnants of the species humanity had erased from the galaxy. I thought about turning back. I should have. My orders weren't to engage, just to arrive. But I had questions no history book could answer. "What do you want?" I asked. Silence. Then, "We want to remember." The haze around me pulsed, like it was alive. Shapes began to take form. Structures, spires, arches, all of them impossibly huge, dwarfing my ship. The more I looked, the more I realized they weren't built. They had grown. Every surface writhed with faint movement, as if the metal was breathing. And in the center, suspended in the void, was something I couldn't process all at once. It was like staring at a black hole wrapped in flesh, something that bent space around it, making my eyes water. "You burned our worlds," the voice said, layering over itself until it felt like a chorus inside my skull. "You erased our name." You earned it, I said, though the words felt weak in my mouth. The chorus laughed, a dry, brittle sound. Your kind fears what it does not understand. We were the mirror you could not face. That's when my ship's systems started failing. One by one, displays went dark. The engines powered down. The only thing still active was the comm channel, now flooding with that breathing, that clicking, that slow, deliberate voice. I reached for the emergency manual override, but the controls were locked. Not by my ship. By them. You should have stayed forgotten, I said. The voice didn't reply. Instead, the haze parted, revealing something far worse than I'd imagined. A Terran ship, one of ours, and not ancient, not wrecked, pristine, powered, and transmitting. My blood went cold. This meant someone had been here before me, recently, someone who never reported back. I maneuvered toward it, though my thrusters were sluggish under whatever field they were using to choke my systems. As I got closer, I saw movement on the Terran hull. Faint, skittering shapes crawling across the metal, disappearing into maintenance hatches. The ship's name was still visible on the side. TSS Valor. The Valor had gone missing 15 years ago, deep in the frontier. Official reports said engine failure, crew lost. But here it was, parked like a trophy. I hailed it. No response. I tried every override code I knew. Nothing. Then, without warning, my own airlock alarm triggered. Something was boarding. I grabbed my sidearm and headed for the lock. The klaxon screamed, red lights strobing across the corridor. I braced myself, expecting claws, teeth, some nightmare out of the war stories. But when the airlock cycled open, it wasn't one of them that stepped inside. It was a man. Terran. Armor scarred, visor cracked, eyes cold and bloodshot. His rifle was aimed squarely at my chest. You shouldn't have come here, he said. His voice was flat, almost mechanical. You're from the Valor, I said. They let me live, he replied. And there was something in the way he said, let that made my skin crawl. They want me to tell you what's coming. I tightened my grip on my sidearm. What's coming? He smiled, not like a man, but like something wearing the memory of one. We remember now. Before I could react, the lights went out. The last thing I heard was the chorus of voices, no longer distant, no longer inside my head, but all around me, filling the ship. Darkness has a weight. You don't think about it until it's pressing down on you, thick and suffocating, like something alive. That was the first thing I noticed. The black wasn't just absence of light, it moved. The vigilance emergency systems should have kicked in instantly, but there was no glow from the backup panels, no hum of auxiliary power. My ears were full of static, but it wasn't coming from the comms anymore. It was inside my skull, like bees crawling in my brain. Then the smell hit me. Not smoke, not ozone, something older. Damp metal, wet earth, rot that had been locked away for centuries. My stomach tightened. Where are you? I shouted into the dark. No answer from the man who had boarded me. No answer from them. I fumbled for the manual light on my sidearm, thumbed it on. The beam cut through maybe 2 meters before it bent, like it was hitting thick water. The corridor walls didn't look like my ship anymore. The clean metal plating was wrong, uneven. Something organic was crawling over it, slowly pulsing, like veins just beneath skin. I took a step forward and my boot sank half an inch into the deck. The floor moved. That's when the whispering started. Not from a single direction. It came from all around, overlapping, too fast to be one voice, but too unified to be random. Words I couldn't understand, but every syllable felt sharp, like it was meant to cut. I followed the sound, sidearm ready, beam sweeping side to side. My ship's interior kept shifting. The familiar turns and junctions of the Vigilant were gone. I was walking through something's rib cage now, curved walls ribbed with ridges, dripping with moisture that steamed when it hit the beam of my light. A shadow moved ahead. Tall. Thin. The wrong number of joints in its limbs. "Stop!" I barked. My voice sounded small here. It stopped. Slowly turned its head toward me. It wasn't one of them. It wasn't the boarding soldier either. It was a blend. The face was human enough to trigger recognition, but stretched, the skin pale and translucent, shot through with dark lines like roots under glass. The eyes were black, not the absence of color, but full, like they were storing something in there. And when it opened its mouth, I realized it had no teeth, just rows of soft, wet ridges. It spoke in the same tone as the voice in my head. "We remember your kind." My finger tensed on the trigger. "Where's the man who came aboard?" It tilted its head. "He is becoming." I fired. The shot hit center mass, point-blank plasma burn. The thing staggered, then straightened, the wound knitting itself closed in seconds. It didn't lunge at me, didn't scream. It just smiled. That's when the deck dropped out from under me. I fell into black water, cold enough to punch the air from my lungs. I surfaced, gasping. But there was no ship above me now, just an endless cavern lit by a faint, sickly glow from walls that breathed. Shapes moved beneath the surface, large shapes. A voice boomed through the chamber. Not the chorus anymore. This was singular, heavier. "Your fathers feared us because we were not bound by the smallness of flesh." I spun in the water, trying to find the source. A ripple spread across the surface, and something broke through, not a head, not a limb, but a memory. It wasn't like seeing a flashback. It was like being inside one. Suddenly I was standing in a Terran warship, 40 years ago, alarms blaring, men shouting. My father was there, younger, leaner, fury in his eyes. The ship's captain was yelling orders to fire on a planet below, its surface teeming with massive black spires. Civilians. Alien civilians. The captain's voice was steady. "We burn them all." I felt the moment the decision hardened. Not out of necessity. Out of rage. The memory dissolved, and I was back in the water, shaking. "You think that justifies what you did?" I spat into the void. The voice didn't answer with words. Instead, shapes began to rise from the water around me. 6 of them, towering, multi-limbed, each one different, like the rules of anatomy didn't apply. They circled, moving just close enough for me to see details. Fragments of Terran armor fused into their flesh, human skulls embedded like trophies in their frames. One leaned closer. Its voice was the whisper of the chorus and the weight of the singular presence combined. "We remember your fury. We will give it back to you." I fired at point-blank range again. This time, the shot vanished into its body without even leaving a mark. The circle tightened. I knew then. They weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to take me. I swam for the far wall, but something caught my leg, cold and unyielding. It pulled me under, deeper, until the light vanished completely. My lungs burned. The static in my head roared. When I surfaced again, I was no longer in water. I was on a deck. Not my ship. Not the Valor. This place was vast, a chamber the size of a city, its ceiling lost in darkness. Rows of towering pillars lined the space, each one filled with liquid. And in each tank, a shape. Some human, some alien, some in between. And standing at the far end, watching me, was the man from the Valor. His armor was gone now. His skin was pale, veins dark against it, eyes as black as the thing I'd seen before. But he still wore that human shape like it meant something to him. "They gave us a choice," he said. His voice was different now, layered, like something else was speaking through him. "Die like cattle, or join them." "What the hell are they?" I asked. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The only species that ever broke you." "No," I said, stepping forward, fists clenched. "We erased you. We buried you so deep no one could remember your name." The black eyes glimmered. "Names don't matter. Memory does, and you've brought us yours." The tanks around me began to glow. Figures stirred inside them, pressing against the glass, their shapes shifting as they moved. I saw Terran uniforms, alien hides, strange hybrid forms that looked like they'd been stitched from nightmares. "They're going to use you," I said. He nodded. "And I'm going to help them." Before I could reach for my weapon, something slammed into my back. My vision flared white, and I hit the floor hard. Cold hands gripped my arms, my legs, dragging me toward an empty tank at the end of the row. The voice, the singular one, filled the chamber again. "We will remember through you." I fought, kicked, cursed, but the grip was unbreakable. The open tank loomed ahead, its fluid swirling like oil on water. I could see my reflection in it, but it wasn't my face. It was something stretched, hollowed, black-eyed. The Valor's man stepped close, leaning down so only I could hear. "You'll see, soon enough. The war never ended." And then they pushed me in. The liquid was colder than the void outside a ship. It filled my mouth, my nose, my lungs, but I didn't drown. My heart pounded, but my body slowed, stilled. My limbs moved without my command, curling against my chest. Somewhere far away the static faded, replaced by a steady pulse. Not mine. Theirs. I realized then what my father had meant when he said remembering them would keep the hate alive. They didn't just want to survive. They wanted to become us, and maybe they already had. I didn't die in the tank. I think that was the point. Death would have been a mercy, and these things weren't in the mercy business. The liquid in my lungs wasn't choking me anymore. I wasn't breathing air, but somehow I was still alive. My heartbeat had slowed to a crawl, but my mind was burning. I couldn't move my arms or legs, couldn't blink. My eyes were open, staring into that shifting black fluid. But it was no longer just liquid. It was a screen, a window, and on the other side was everything. First came the images, fleets burning, cities collapsing into dust. The old war, the silence, played out in perfect clarity. I saw Terran ships slicing through their defense lines like they were made of paper. I saw our orbital strikes boiling oceans, cracking planets in half. And I saw their civilians, strange, tall, lightless-eyed, screaming in silence as firestorms erased them from existence. The feed didn't stop there. It twisted, rewound, showed me their side. The early days, the first contact. We weren't the victims at the start. We were the invaders. We'd mined their border worlds before we'd even announced ourselves. We'd pushed deeper, hungrier, convinced they were too primitive to matter. And then they'd shown us the truth. Not with weapons, with thought. The first Terran ships to vanish hadn't been destroyed. The crews had joined them willingly, convinced they were better off under their control. No torture, no threats, just persuasion so perfect it felt like destiny. That's why my father's generation had feared them. Not because they could kill us, plenty of species could try that, but because they could make us walk into the slaughter smiling. The voice was back in my head, not whispering now, speaking. We learned you through your hate. We wore your rage like a second skin. We still do. The images shifted again. I saw Terran generals during the war, cold-eyed, efficient, willing to burn a galaxy rather than lose it. I saw my father, armor scorched, gunning down something that looked like it was begging. I saw the meeting rooms after the war, where the last survivors of their species were hunted down in secret, one by one, erased from every record until they were nothing but a ghost story. And then I saw. Now. The haze sector, my ship, me, being pulled into the tank. I tried to fight it. The memories, the images, the voice. But the more I resisted, the heavier the liquid felt. It was like fighting quicksand. You want to know why we spared you? The voice said. I didn't answer. Because you're a door. The black liquid around me rippled. My body moved, not under my control, and my hand pressed against the inside of the glass. On the other side, I saw another figure in a tank. Human, young, Terran Navy uniform. His eyes opened, black and endless. The tanks weren't prisons. They were conduits, a network. And the moment our hands touched the glass, I felt it, the pulse, the connection. I could hear him in my head. They've been spreading, he said, though his lips didn't move. Every missing ship, every unexplained disappearance. They've been using us to move through your fleets without being noticed. How? I thought back, unsure if I was imagining the conversation. They can hide in our thoughts. They ride in the gaps. No scanner picks it up because the scanner isn't looking in the right place. He leaned forward. And they're going to use you to get back into Terran space. I didn't have time to reply. Something pulled me out of his mind. Hard. The liquid flashed with white light, and I was back in my own head, gasping in silence. The voice returned. We have been patient. You will not be. The tank split open. The liquid poured out, dropping me to my knees on the slick floor. My muscles screamed as feeling returned, but the weakness was temporary. Too temporary. My body felt better than it had in years. Stronger. Faster. I realized with a rush of horror that they had altered me. The man from the Valor stepped out of the shadows. He looked the same as before, pale, veined, black-eyed. But now I could feel him in my head like a second heartbeat. You ready? He said. For what? I spat, pushing myself to my feet. He didn't answer with words. He just turned and started walking toward a massive arch at the end of the chamber. It wasn't made of metal or stone. It was made of them. The walls shifted and twitched, faces half formed in the surface before melting back into the mass. The arch opened, and I saw space beyond it. Real space. Stars. This leads out, he said, straight into Terran territory. You're insane if you think I'm leading you there. He smiled, that same not-quite-human smile. You don't have a choice. They've already threaded you. I didn't understand the word, but the moment he said it, I felt it. A pressure deep in my skull, a compulsion buried under my own thoughts. The moment I got back to Terran space, I'd carry them with me. Invisible, undetectable. No, I said, shaking my head. I won't. He stepped close. Every soldier says that at first. None of them mean it when the time comes. I swung at him, hard, fast, stronger than I'd expected. My fist connected with his jaw, and for a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by something colder. He caught my arm and twisted it behind my back in one smooth motion. You think you're fighting me, he said, but you're fighting yourself now. And I know exactly how you lose. Before I could answer, the floor under us shifted, carrying us toward the arch. My boots slid on the slick surface, my body resisting. But every step took me closer to that threshold. I could feel the pull in my chest growing, the compulsion tightening. Then, a sound. Not the whispering, not the voice, a real sound, metal, engines. Through the arch, I saw it, a Terran patrol ship dropping out of FTL, directly ahead. They were close enough that their running lights gleamed against the arch's surface. The man from the Valor looked pleased. "Your ride's here." I made my move. I wrenched my arm free, slammed my shoulder into his chest, and sent him staggering into the wall. The surface of the arch reacted instantly. Faces lunged out of it, dragging him in, wrapping around him like quicksand. His muffled scream echoed in my head and then cut off entirely. I ran. The arch pulsed as I crossed it, the transition like being shoved through freezing liquid. I hit the deck plating of the Terran patrol ship hard, rolling to absorb the impact. My lungs burned, but I was breathing air again. The crew stared at me, armed, wary. One of them recognized my uniform. "Identify yourself," the captain barked. I opened my mouth and froze. The pressure in my skull was gone. Number not gone, hiding. I realized then exactly what had happened. The arch had let me go because I'd already done what they wanted. I was in Terran space now. I was carrying them with me, in my head, invisible to every scan this ship could run. And worse, I didn't know if I was still me. They didn't trust me from the second I hit the deck, and I didn't blame them. I must have looked like hell, uniform shredded, skin pale from whatever that black fluid had done to me, eyes sunken from days without real sleep. The captain's men had me at gunpoint while a medic ran a scanner over me. "Vitals are stable," the medic said, glancing at the captain. "But, sir, there's something off." "Off how?" the captain asked. The medic hesitated, as if the words wouldn't come out right. "His brain activity is inconsistent, spikes in the limbic system, heavy interference in the prefrontal cortex, like he's been under constant neurostatic bombardment." The captain frowned. "Are you compromised, Lieutenant?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Yes, but not in the way you think." That earned me a pair of restraints and a security escort straight to the brig. I didn't fight it. Truth was, the brig was safer. For them. They didn't know it, but I could feel the thing inside me. Quiet now. Curled in the back of my mind like a predator, waiting for the right moment to pounce. They didn't try to interrogate me right away. Maybe they were waiting for orders. Maybe they thought time would soften me up. But time was the last thing we had. On the second day, it started. The first sign was the communications officer. I heard him before I saw him. A faint clicking sound, like nails tapping on a desk. When I looked through the brig bars, he was just standing there, staring out a viewport. I'd seen that stare before, on the Valor. Then the engineer stopped answering calls over the intercom. Then 2 security guards went missing during patrol. The captain finally came down to see me. His uniform was immaculate, but there was tension in the way he moved, fast, sharp, like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. "You said you were compromised," he said, keeping his distance. "Explain." I shook my head. "It won't make sense until it's too late. They don't take ships by force. They take people, one by one. Quietly. By the time you notice, half your crew will be theirs." He didn't like that answer, but he didn't call it wrong either. "How do you stop it?" he asked. "You don't," I said. "Not without burning the infection out completely, and that means you burn me too." His jaw tightened. He didn't like where this was going. That night, I felt it move. It was subtle, a faint pressure in the back of my skull, like a migraine blooming in slow motion. My thoughts slowed, my pulse steadied. And somewhere deep in my mind, another voice rose, low and patient. "They're almost ready. You'll open the way." I gritted my teeth and slammed my head back against the wall, hard enough to make the room spin. Pain helped. It was like shining a light into a dark corner. The voice retreated, but not far. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I spent the hours listening to the ship's sounds, the hum of the engines, the faint shudder when the course adjusted. But underneath it all, there was something else. A second rhythm. A slow, steady pulse that matched the one I'd felt in the tank. By morning, the ship was quieter than it should have been. No footsteps in the corridor. No intercom chatter. When the captain returned, he wasn't alone. 4 armed guards followed, but I didn't recognize their faces. Their eyes were black. Not completely, not yet. But enough. "You're coming with us," the captain said. "No," I said, "I'm not." He tilted his head, and the guards moved in. I waited until the first one reached for me before I acted. I drove my shoulder into his chest, grabbed his rifle as he staggered, and spun it on the nearest guard. The shot was point blank. Plasma lit up the brig in a white-blue flash, the smell of scorched flesh filling the air. The captain's expression didn't change. He didn't shout, didn't order his men to fire. He just watched. I realized then he was already theirs. The remaining guards lunged, and I didn't have time to think. I shot one in the knee, slammed the butt of the rifle into another's throat, and kicked the last one hard enough to send him crashing into the cell wall. I stepped over their bodies and leveled the rifle at the captain. "Where's the bridge?" I asked. His smile was wrong, too calm. "We're already there." The lights cut out. For a second, I thought it was another blackout, like on the Vigilant. But then the emergency lights came on, dim red strips along the floor, just enough to see shapes moving in the shadows. Not human shapes. They were here. Inside the ship. The captain didn't move when one of them slid out of the darkness behind him. It was tall, thin, its limbs bending in ways that made my stomach turn. Its face leaned close to his ear, and he nodded like it was whispering something to him. I fired. The plasma bolt hit the thing square in the chest and passed through it like smoke. It didn't even look at me. Instead, it reached into the captain's back, not piercing, but entering, its arm vanishing into his body like he was made of liquid. The captain shuddered, gasped, and then straightened. When he turned to face me, his eyes were black. Fully. "You'll take us home," he said. I ran. I didn't care where, just away from the bridge, away from whatever that thing had become. I could hear them following, their movements fast but irregular, like they didn't need to obey the same rules of motion I did. The ship felt different now. Corridors longer than they should be. Doors leading to places that didn't exist on the schematics. The infection wasn't just in the crew, it was in the ship. I made it to the armory. It was locked, but Terran locks weren't made to stop someone desperate enough. I overrode the panel, slipped inside, and sealed the door behind me. The room was dark except for the faint glow of weapon racks. Plasma rifles. Grenades. Charges meant for hull breach emergencies. I took all of it. If I couldn't kill them, I could still kill their ride. I set the charges along the bulkheads, near the reactor conduits. The timers were short, 5 minutes. Enough time to reach an escape pod. But when I opened the armory door, the corridor wasn't empty. The man from the Valor was standing there. "You can't outrun this," he said. "I'm not planning to," I replied. He tilted his head, almost curious. "You think destroying one ship will matter?" "No," I said, "but it'll slow you down." He smiled. "We like when you fight. It makes the taking sweeter." I didn't wait for him to finish. I threw the first grenade down the corridor and ran the other way. The blast shook the deck under my feet, but I didn't look back. The escape pods were ahead. I could see the bay door, and I could hear them behind me. The clicking, the breathing, the chorus. I reached the nearest pod, slammed the hatch shut, and hit the eject. The pod shot free just as the charges went off. Through the viewport, I saw the Terran patrol ship bloom into a fireball, pieces spinning away into the void. For a second, I thought I'd done it. Then the comm in the pod crackled. "You can't burn what's already inside you?" I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. My reflection in the viewport showed my eyes, not black, not yet, but darker than they'd been before. They weren't dead. They were in me, and they were going home. The escape pod drifted in silence. No engines, no weapons, no crew, just me, strapped into a seat that felt like a coffin with a viewport. I watched the wreckage of the patrol ship shrink into the distance. It should have been a victory, but I knew better. Blowing up the ship didn't kill what was inside it. The infection didn't need metal to survive. It had me. I could feel it now. Not an alien voice in my head, not some sci-fi possession, but a pressure. A second presence moving under the surface of my own thoughts. If I tried to focus on it, it slipped away, like it didn't want to be looked at directly. But every now and then, it let me feel it, just enough to remind me it was there. The pod's autopilot pinged. A Terran recovery ship was on approach. ETA 4 hours. That gave me 4 hours to figure out if I was bringing home a survivor or a weapon. I tried every test I could think of. Pulse check, neural scan, adrenaline trigger, to see if I could flush it out. Nothing worked. The thing was patient. It didn't fight me, didn't try to take over. That was the worst part. It was waiting for the right moment. When the recovery ship finally appeared, its docking clamps locking onto the pod, I had a decision to make. I could refuse to go aboard, force them to leave me drifting out here, or I could risk infecting them. I told myself I'd warn them, that I'd make them understand before anyone touched me. But the moment the hatch opened and I saw human faces, tired and wary, something inside me went still. I walked out without a word. The ship was the CNS Garrison, a medium-range carrier with a crew of 80. The captain, Commander Hale, was a broad man with hard lines on his face that said he'd seen real fighting. He didn't shake my hand. He just looked me up and down and said, "Report." I told him a version of the truth. Not the whole thing, not the part about the thing in my head, but enough to make him take me seriously. The erased sector, the valor, the hybrid creatures, the patrol ship going dark, the explosion. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "You're going to medical. Full quarantine until we get back to Terran space." I didn't argue. Quarantine sounded like the smartest thing anyone had suggested all week. They locked me in an isolation room, sealed glass walls, negative pressure airlock, no contact except through an intercom. I sat on the bunk and stared at the ceiling, waiting for the thing inside me to make its move. It didn't. Not that day. Not the next. By the third day, I was starting to think maybe it had burned out. Maybe I'd shaken it when the ship blew. That's when the dreams started. They weren't nightmares in the usual sense. No monsters, no blood. Just memories that weren't mine. Alien cities under black skies. Oceans that moved like living things. The feel of minds brushing against each other without speaking. When I woke, I could still smell the air from those places. I could taste it. And I knew. The thing wasn't gone. It was teaching me. On the fourth day, the garrison changed course. I didn't need to be told where we were going. I could feel it. The thing in my head wanted to go there, and I could see it like a beacon. Earth. That's when I stopped pretending I could sit in this room and do nothing. I waited until the next meal drop, when a crewman slid a tray through the airlock. When he leaned close to seal it, I slammed the tray back into his face, hard enough to send him sprawling. I was out of the cell before the alarms even started. I didn't head for the bridge. That's where they'd expect me to go. I went for engineering. If I couldn't kill the thing inside me, I could still kill the ride it was using to get home. 2 engineers were on shift. Neither had time to draw a weapon before I had them down and tied with whatever cabling I could grab. The reactor was sealed, but I didn't need to get inside it. I just needed to spike it. I was halfway through overriding the safety locks when Hale's voice came over the intercom. "Lieutenant, step away from my reactor." I ignored him. "You think you're saving us," he said. "But you're not. You're just making it easier for whatever's in your head to get what it wants." I froze. "You know?" There was a pause. "I've seen it before. 30 years ago. A recon pilot came back from a dead sector talking about voices and black-eyed crew. Command said he cracked under stress. But I saw it in his eyes, and I saw what happened when they tried to contain him." "What happened?" I asked. "They failed," Hale said flatly. 2 months later, 3 ships were gone. No debris, no distress calls, just gone. That should have made me more determined. Instead, it made me hesitate. If Hale was telling the truth, then the infection had been trying to get back into Terran space for decades, and now here I was, about to hand it another chance, either by letting it reach Earth or by blowing myself up and taking 80 people with me. "Lieutenant," Hale said quietly, "I can space you right now. No questions, no court-martial, just a clean end. You want that?" I almost said yes. I wanted it more than I wanted to admit. But the thing inside me moved then. Just a twitch. Just enough to make my hand slip on the controls. And in that split second, I knew it wanted me dead here, not later. Now. Because if I died here, it could jump. Find someone else. Slip into the next mind before anyone knew. "No," I said. "You're not giving it another body to hide in." I finished the override. The reactor alarms wailed, a rising scream of metal and heat. Hale swore over the intercom, shouting orders I didn't hear. I was already running for the escape pods. I didn't get far. The pressure hit me first, like my skull was being crushed from the inside. My legs buckled, my vision went white, and I heard the voice again. "You are ours." When I came to, I was back in the isolation cell. My hands were bound. Hale was standing on the other side of the glass, arms folded. "You didn't blow us up," he said. "You didn't even make it halfway to the pods. Whatever's inside you, it stopped you, didn't it?" I didn't answer. "Yeah," he said. "That's what I thought." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "We'll be in Terran orbit in 48 hours. I'm keeping you alive until then, because I think Command needs to see exactly what you've brought back with you. But if you so much as look at one of my crew the wrong way, I'll vent you into space myself. Clear?" I nodded once. When he was gone, I sat on the bunk and stared at my reflection in the glass. My eyes were darker than before. Not black, not yet. But getting there. 48 hours. 2 days to figure out how to kill something no one can see that's already in my head and is counting on me to take it home. And the worst part? Somewhere deep down, in a place I don't like to think about, part of me wants to let it. 2 days. That's all Hale gave me. 48 hours between being pulled out of the void and being brought straight to the heart of Terran space, carrying a parasite no one could see, no one could detect, and no one would believe in until it was already too late. I didn't waste the time sleeping. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I was somewhere else, walking through alien streets under a sky that bent wrong, feeling minds brush mine like cold fingers, hearing the chorus of them just under the surface. They weren't whispering threats anymore. They were whispering promises. "You'll be more than you are. No more fear. No more loss." I'd heard soldiers talk like that after too many campaigns, men who'd lost too much and would grab at any hand that promised to make them whole again. That was what they were doing to me, not with force, but with temptation. By the morning of the second day, I could feel their excitement. It wasn't mine, it was theirs. They were going home. The garrison dropped into the Sol system right on schedule. I felt the shift in my bones before the nav sensors confirmed it. We were in Terran-controlled space. Safe space. For everyone except the rest of the species. Hale didn't speak to me until we were approaching the inner defense line. When he finally came down to my cell, he didn't bring guards. Just him, leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed. "We're docking with an orbital station in 4 hours," he said. "After that, you're out of my hands and in fleet intelligences. You know what that means." It wasn't a question. I knew. Interrogation. Dissection, if they thought it would help. And if the thing inside me jumped to one of them in the process, the infection would spread at the very top of the chain of command. "You can't let me off this ship," I said. His eyes narrowed. "You planning to tell me why?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice low even though I knew damn well the thing inside me could hear. "Because if I set foot on that station, they'll have it. And you won't even know it's happened until the station goes quiet. And then the next one. And the next." He studied me for a long moment. "You're asking me to kill you." "I'm telling you it's the only way to keep it out." Hale didn't answer. He just turned and left. 3 hours later, I felt it start moving again. It didn't come at me head on. It seeped in from the edges of my thoughts, blurring my focus, making me forget why I was sitting in this cell in the first place. By the time I realized what was happening, I was standing at the door, hand on the panel, ready to walk out. I slammed my head into the wall hard enough to draw blood. Pain was the only thing that cut through it. The thing hissed in my head, not in pain, but in irritation, like a parent scolding a child for misbehaving. I spat on the floor. "You don't get to use me." The hiss turned into a slow, deliberate chuckle. "We already are." The garrison began its final approach to the orbital station. Through the viewport in my cell, I could see it. A vast wheel of steel and glass hanging against the curve of the Earth. Shuttles moved in perfect arcs, docking and undocking like blood cells in a vein. Thousands of people lived there. Families. Children. They had no idea they were about to become the first beachhead of a second war. I thought about my father. About how he'd said they erased the enemy's name to keep the hate from living on. I understood it now. Hate was fuel. And if what was inside me made it into that station, there'd be more than enough hate to burn the galaxy down all over again. I made my choice. The cell door opened without warning. Hale stood there, holding my sidearm. "You've got one chance," he said. "You want to finish this your way, you do it now. But you take even one step toward my crew and I put you down myself." I nodded. Took the gun. Checked the charge. Full. We didn't speak as he led me to the airlock. The rest of the crew kept their distance, but I could feel their eyes on me. Some of them curious, some of them afraid, and some too calm. We reached the lock. Hale keyed in a sequence that disabled the station-side docking clamps. The airlock hatch slid open, revealing nothing but the cold black of space between us and the station's outer ring. "This is it," he said. "You go out, you don't come back." "That's the idea." He held out his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, steady. No sign the thing had taken him. Yet. "Make it count," he said. I stepped into the lock. The hatch closed behind me. I've done EVA work before. The void doesn't scare me. But this time I wasn't just walking into space. I was walking into my own execution. The inner hatch cycled shut. The outer hatch began to open. That's when it hit me. Not with whispers, but with everything it had. My knees buckled. My lungs seized. Images slammed into my mind so fast I couldn't breathe. The cities, the oceans, the hive. And at the center of it all, a vision of myself, stronger, faster, untouchable, standing at the head of a fleet that wasn't entirely human anymore. You could be the one who ends it all, it said. No more wars, no more loss, just strength, just survival. For a heartbeat, I wanted it. I saw myself stepping onto that station, the infection spreading through the crowd like wildfire, and for the first time in history, humanity and the last of them united, not as enemies, but as something new, something unstoppable. And then I saw my father's face, the look in his eyes when he said, "We don't need that anymore." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood why they'd burned the galaxy to stop these things. "No," I said. "We finish it." I pushed off into the void. The suit's thrusters burned white against the black as I angled away from the station and toward the garrison. The thing inside me screamed, not in words, but in raw fury. I could feel it clawing at my thoughts, trying to turn me back. I didn't. When I was close enough, I thumbed the detonator Hale had slipped into my suit's wrist pocket. The charges I'd set in engineering before collapsing, the ones they'd thought they'd disarmed, were still there. The garrison lit up in a bloom of fire, the shockwave slamming into me hard enough to spin me end over end. The comms filled with shouts, alarms, static. The screaming in my head cut off like someone had thrown a switch. When the spin finally slowed, I was alone. The garrison was gone. The station was intact. I didn't know if the thing was dead. I didn't know if I was. All I knew was that for the first time since the Haze sector, my thoughts were my own. And that meant one thing. If even one more of them was still out there, I'd find it. And this time, I wouldn't stop until there was nothing left to forget. When the fire faded, there was nothing but cold. No ship, no sound. Just me, drifting in a suit that was down to 40 minutes of oxygen. The black was so deep it didn't feel like space anymore. It felt like the Haze sector again, like they might reach out of it any second. I kept expecting to hear it, that breathing, that chorus, that slow, deliberate voice in my head. But all I got was silence. It wasn't comforting. I thought about the garrison, about Hale. 80 lives gone in one flash, because I couldn't risk one of them making it home. The math didn't bother me. The math made sense. What bothered me was that this was exactly how my father's war had ended. The first silence had been born in fire, and now I'd lit my own. Maybe that was the only way humans knew how to win. I don't remember passing out, but I must have. The next thing I knew, the sun was in my face. Bright, harsh, and real. My visor's filters adjusted, and I saw it. A Terran recovery ship, smaller than the garrison, pulling me in with a grappler arm. They dragged me into the airlock, stripped my helmet, and hit me with a flood of questions before I could even breathe. Name, rank, last assignment. I told them I'd been with the garrison on approach to the Sol station when we were hit. Didn't mention by who. Didn't mention what I'd been carrying. I wasn't going to risk it getting in through their ears. They put me in a med bay, ran scans, pumped me with stabilizers. The doctor frowned at her readouts. "You've got elevated neural activity in the..." She started, but I cut her off. "Drop it," I said. "Clear me for duty or space me. No middle ground." She didn't like it, but she stamped the clearance. I think she was just relieved to get me out of her hands. They took me to the bridge to debrief with the captain, a younger man, all crisp uniform and careful speech. "We've sent word to the station," he said. "They'll want your full report when we dock." I leaned across his desk. "You're not taking me to the station." His eyes narrowed. "That's not your call." "It is if you want to keep that station breathing," I said. He tried to stare me down. It didn't work. I'd looked into blacker eyes than his. Finally, he sat back. Explain. So I did. Not everything. I kept the details about the network, the tanks, the man from the Valor, but enough that he understood we weren't talking about pirates or enemy fleets. We were talking about something that moved through people like a disease. He didn't believe me, not completely. But he'd heard enough war stories from the veterans to know when someone wasn't bluffing. "What do you want?" he asked. "Two things," I said. "A direct line to fleet intelligence and a ship." It took a day to get both. Fleet intelligence didn't send a voice. They sent a man in person. Older than Hale, older than my father had been when he died. He had the kind of stillness you only get from decades of knowing where the bodies are buried, because you're the one who buried them. We met in a sealed briefing room. No crew, no recordings. "You've seen them," he said without preamble. "Yes." "They're not supposed to exist anymore." "They do, and they're still trying to come back." He studied me for a long time. "You're sure you're clean?" "No," I said honestly. That got the smallest ghost of a smile. "Good. The ones who say they're sure never are." The ship they gave me wasn't much. An old interceptor, stripped for speed, with just enough teeth to bite if I got close. It wasn't meant for patrol. It was meant for hunting. My orders were simple. Track the missing ships. Every unexplained disappearance in the outer sectors over the last 20 years. Find the source. Burn it down. No survivors. It was the same order my father had been given during the first silence. The same order that had ended with an entire species erased from memory. The first trail took me to the Fringe, a system so far off the charts it didn't have a designation, just coordinates and a warning tag. "Do not enter." I entered. The moment I crossed the edge, my sensors started glitching, same as in the haze sector, stars disappearing, data wiping itself. But I wasn't here to log readings. I was here to burn whatever I found. It didn't take long. They were there, same as before, drifting shapes, cold light in the dark, moving just enough to let me know they saw me. The voice came back, softer this time. "You came alone." "Yeah," I said. "Makes it easier." I fired everything I had. Torpedoes, railguns, plasma. The dark lit up like a new sun, and for a moment, I thought I'd caught them off guard. Then the light faded, and they were still there. "You cannot kill what you cannot hold." "Maybe not," I said, "but I can make damn sure you don't leave." I targeted the nearest planetoid and put my last torpedo into its core. The detonation ripped it apart, scattering debris across the entire sector. The shockwave sent them scattering, not in fear, but in calculation. I'd just turned their hiding place into a debris field too dangerous for any ship to pass through without being shredded. I'd bought time, that was all. But sometimes time is enough. Over the next 6 months, I hit 7 more sites. Always the same pattern. Missing ships, faint traces of their presence, and then the cold shapes watching me from the dark. They never attacked outright. They didn't need to. They were waiting for me to slip, for me to come too close, for them to get into my head again. I didn't give them the chance. Every site ended the same way. Fire, debris, and nothing left worth salvaging. Fleet intelligence kept my reports classified. The official line was that I was tracking pirate activity and clearing dangerous wrecks. No mention of what was really out there. No mention of the silence. That was fine by me, because here's the thing. You can't win a war against something like this by telling everyone it exists. You win by making sure no one ever sees it, no one ever remembers it. The first time, we'd erased their name from history. This time, I wasn't stopping at the name. I was going to erase everything. I don't know how long it'll take. Maybe the rest of my life. Maybe longer. But I know this. If they ever come back in force, if they ever set foot in human space again, there won't be a third war. There'll just be the end of everything. And I'm not going to let that happen. Even if it means becoming the thing my father feared most. Even if it means there's nothing left of me by the time it's done. Because I've seen what they can do. And I've seen what happens when you make humanity angry.